Good evening. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Joint Planning Board and Planning Licenses and Development Committee. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. If you are in our audience tonight, you may access the agenda from any mobile device. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets just as you entered the room. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. Will the staff please call the roll?
Harold Farrington.
Present.
Roberta Mastrogiovanni. Mayor Jay Kahn. Councilor Mike Remy. Sarah Vizani. Here. Ryan Clancy.
Here.
Kenneth Cost. Armando Rangel.
Here.
And for alternates, Stefan Mayhew. Brandon Marcolon.
Here.
Tammy Adams. And Michael Hafer.
Here.
And Mr. Mayor
We're doing the roll.
could say that you're here.
Roberta Mastrogiovanni.
Thank you. And then for the
Mayor Jay
PLD
Kahn.
committee, Kate Bosley.
Councilor
Here.
Mike Remy.
Phil Jones.
Sarah
Here.
Vizani.
Bobby Williams.
Here.
Ed
Ryan
Haas.
Clancy.
Here.
And Andrew Madison.
Kenneth
Present.
Cost. Armando Rangel.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you would like,
And for
you
alternates,
could
Stefan
promote
Mayhew, Brandon
Ms.
Marcolon.
Marcolon and
Here.
Mr. Hafer as
Tammy
voting
Adams.
members, I believe,
And
because we
Michael
have
Hafer.
both.
And
Yeah, I'm not the mayor yet, but
Mr.
I will,
Mayor.
I'll be happy to do so.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry about that. Mr. Chair, I mean,
And
I
then
believe
for
we
the
have, so
PLD
Ken is
committee,
not
Kate
here
Bosley,
and
Councilor Mike
Roberta,
Remy.
so we
No,
have
it's
two
me.
spots
Phil
that could be
Jones.
filled.
Bobby Williams.
Thank you.
Ed Haas.
Okay.
And Andrew Madison.
Present.
Now moving to the next item on the agenda, which is the
Mr. Mayor, if
approval
you
of the
would
minutes
like,
of the
you
May
could promote
13th, 2024 meeting.
Ms. Marcolon and Mr. Hafer as voting members,
Thank
I
you.
believe, because
Mayor.
we have both.
Mayor Khan, second, thank you. Any questions, comments, or changes on the minutes?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry about that. Mr. Chair, I mean.
Apologize, we're working on the sound.
And Roberta, so we have two
It's not on the
spots
TV,
filled.
so it's coming through the overhead.
Okay.
Andrew Madison.
Now moving to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes
Okay.
of the May 13th. All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the May 13th, 2024 meeting. I'll ask again, any questions, comments, or changes? Seeing none, I'll move to vote on the motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Minutes are accepted. Now we'll move to a continued public workshop. All right, so we have a motion and a second. This is a continued public workshop for ordinance dash 0-2023-16B relating to permitted uses in the downtown core, downtown growth, and commerce districts. Petitioner, City of Keene Community Development Department, proposes to amend Section 8.3.2 of Article 8 of the Land Development Code to add a definition for charitable gaming facility and to amend Table 8-1, Table 4-1, and Table 5.1.5 to display charitable gaming facilities as a permitted use in the downtown growth district and commerce district. In addition, the petitioner proposes to amend Section 8.4.2.c.2.a of Article 8 of the LDC to remove drive-through uses at a permitted use by special exception in the downtown core district. For charitable gaming facility. Okay. And to amend. At this time, I'd like to ask, Table 4-1 and Table 5.1. Ask Director Rounds to address.
Good evening. We're still working on the sound issue. I apologize. I am going to once again attempt to share a PowerPoint. And for the maybe fourth or fifth time, we'll see if technology is on my side. I think we're wondering if someone's laptop is feeding that. Give me a moment.
Log into the network.
Good evening. We're still working on the sound issue. I apologize. I am going to once again
Non-public.
I'm also trying to share my screen. It's not working. Do you want me to run in? presentation has never gone well. Every time I try technology, it fails.
I didn't want to throw this meeting under the bus immediately, but yeah, we've had some tech. I don't know why things go so smoothly at committee and council. Because for whatever reason, Monday is not a good day for this one.
That's what it is.
It's just Monday.
I appreciate you not holding me. That was great.
Sorry.
All right, is it working now? Oh, I think it's working.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, I'm just a participant, like, yeah. It's the women that run it.
All right, I think we're good to go. Yeah. Jesse Rounds, Community Development Director, and I believe this is the fourth time I'm bringing charitable gaming back to you in various forms, and I appreciate everyone's really helpful advice from the last time we met. And I will admit that Mary helped improve my presentation significantly by adding a lot of context and some pictures. So it's not just a big white screen. So first of all, just want to start with the charitable gaming facility proposed definition. This is the same definition that we started with in the A version. It's long, but basically what it says is we're defining charitable gaming facility as what the state defines under RSA 287D and RSA 287E, which essentially means we're covering all the various kinds of machines, games of chance, and Lucky 7 and Bingo are covered under this. At our meeting 2 meetings ago, you asked us to come up with some proposed use standards. When we brought them back last month, you had some suggestions, and so what we did was we took your suggestions and tried to get at the questions you had, but also there are a couple of decision points that I want to sort of point out and see where see what your direction is. So the first is only one charitable gaming facility shall be permitted per lot. There were a bunch of things about distance between them and all that sort of stuff. And what we realized was, after all of that conversation about a distance of 500 feet, 1,000 feet, whatever, it was really better to just say one per lot. And so that's what we're proposing. And please feel free to jump in if you have any questions or comments as I go along. Since this is a workshop, we don't have as strict a rule. Then the next couple standards or couple points are about location. We had a pretty long conversation about the West Street locations, and what we understood was parcels 1.25 acres in size or greater. That's across all areas in the city where we're going to permit this. And then the other part of it was west of Island Street, so between Route 9 and Island Street, basically. And you'll notice on this map, there are a bunch of parcels that are smaller than 1.25 acres, although you don't have a scale. Just believe me that many of these parcels are smaller than that, but you could you could merge lots to make a lot of 1.25 acres in size. So that's why I included some of these smaller lots. It is possible to make them 1.25 acres. There was a discussion about Colony Mill, that property which at one point in the recent past had a charitable gaming facility, but looking back at the minutes and through our notes, we understood that that was not preferred by most of the group, and so we took it out, but we can obviously add it back in. So there's that. And just to note, something that Mary and I talked about today, these maps won't appear in the final ordinance because properties can change. So we just want to say along this corridor of this size, with storefronts facing the parking areas or lots fronting on the road. Second district was Key Road, Winchester Street, and Kit Street. Key Road and Kit Street were added after conversation with this group. And they really are, again, parcels 1.25 acres in size and in commerce. So that's all those lots. Any questions or concerns? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, that was my fault for saying yes. I apologize.
Sorry, I was just checking on one point. Oh, Mr. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember from discussions, there was some wording that we hashed out. It wasn't color-coded last time, but the, what is that? Is that east or south? Is that south? South.
This area here, east
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Is that, would that be
So the-
permitted use or no?
The reason we kept it out is that it's not commerce zone, it's not zoned commerce, so that's why we, but again, that's something we can change. That's not a problem if that's something people are interested in. And then the last large zone we looked at, and two maps here just to give some context, is land with frontage on Ashbrook Road. So Ashbrook is just that very short leg there, but the entire parcel to the north of Ashbrook Road there is considered having frontage on Ashbrook because the parcels inside are actually condominiums. All right. Now we get into some questions for all of you with some we look back again at the minutes, and this was a pretty confusing section before, but this is distances from charitable gaming facilities to other uses. And all charitable gaming facilities shall be subjected to the following distance requirements, and the measurement shall be from the property line of any site to the closest exterior wall of the facility. So that's what the diagram is intended to indicate. And our first decision point, one of the things we wanted to ask you was, we heard no charitable gaming facility shall be located within 500 feet of another charitable gaming facility. There was some discussion, 500, 1,000, and I'm not sure if you want to have a discussion about that now, or we'll just keep going through and then see if that comes out. Next one, no charitable gaming facility shall be permitted within 250 feet of any place of worship. So again, just indicated property line of the place of worship, child care center, or public or private school to the outside, to the exterior wall of the charitable gaming facility. No charitable gaming facility shall be permitted within 250 feet of a single or two-family dwelling, and no charitable gaming facility shall be permitted within 250 feet of any residential zoning district. So that's a little bit of difference there, but single and two-family dwellings can be in non-residential zoning districts. We have a lot actually in our commerce district, which is a lot of what borders the south border of West Street is residential dwelling units. All right. Standard D, this is the minimum square footage discussion. We went back and forth. Last time we had a 20,000 square foot definition, and it was, again, the gaming floor does not include areas such as accounting, maintenance, surveillance, so on and so forth. We reduced that minimum to 10,000 square feet after the discussion here. But again, we did want to check in on the gaming floor question. We could say 10,000 square feet inclusive of all those things, all the things listed at the bottom there underlined. It could have a significant impact. It may not have any impact, but wanted to raise that question with all of you. Ooh, I didn't even see the little bubble come up before. Nice.
Thank you,
Councilor
Chair.
Haas.
Howard Parrington. Yeah, I was an advocate of no minimums or including the other areas. I think we're constraining the imagination of future purveyors of charitable gaming. That's my concept of that. I don't know why we have to have a minimum to force it to be of a certain size, other than to make other things unprofitable.
Counselor Williams?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Haas. I don't want to, well, I don't want to encourage these things to be too big in general, but also I don't want, you know, if there is an existing building that can be used for this, I don't want a lot of unnecessary construction have to go on just to make the minimum size of that building meet this requirement.
I'll add to my comment, sorry. Yeah, if we do the use standards correctly, I think we'd solve the problem of having multiple small venues throughout the city. So if we separate them properly, have the setbacks properly, identify the zones as we're doing properly, that would put a constraint on the number of conceivable casinos that we might have in the city, other than the factors of licenses limiting, which is kind of an overriding thing of everything we talk about. I'm not sure we can address that ourselves. We're just looking at where we can put them.
Counselor Mosley?
So I have to disagree with a lot of that context, mainly on the basis that I don't want to see 20 of these facilities in our community. It's not what I see, and we're working on our master plan now, and this is a good conversation for our master plan as we update it. But this is not something that I see that I want to be proliferated around the city. And the way that these rules are written currently, if you reduce that minimum lots or that minimum square footage requirement, you could have 8 of them on West Street, you could have 6 of them on Key Road, you could have, I mean, there could be 40 charitable gaming facilities if there were investors interested in doing that. I think that through the code, this is the one area that we have to create some barriers and make the code work and to get an outcome that we want to see in general for the community. So personally, I wanted it to stay much higher. I wanted to see one successful facility in our community, not 20 tiny, struggling facilities and potentially some of the baggage that they might bring. So personally, I think this was our compromise that we got to at our last meeting, and I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you.
I'll just add one last point. I think we want to do the same thing, only coming at it from different directions. I don't want to constrain free enterprise. I'd rather do it with distance separations. I played with some of the mapping, and I'm sure you could do it better than I, where if we set distance separations properly, we would see that we could only have X number of facilities in the city and ranging out into the different areas. So either way seems to get at the same goal, but I hate anything where we constrain free enterprise.
Mr. Hafer?
Last time we reviewed it was 20,000 square feet. We remember the discussion. I think I held the higher or lower discussion. You know, I'm comfortable with the 10,000 as well. I feel like that's a significant reduction from where we started. And again, there's the commercial aspect of the study showing, I believe, the study showing these facilities need to be a certain size to be successful. So I, for one, comfortable where it stands at 10,000.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we ever get a exact figure on the game floor for the current casino in town.
We did not.
I'd have to agree with what Councillor Haas and Councillor Williams are saying with not setting a limit and creating free enterprise. And at the end of the day, I don't see this blowing up as a industry in town, and I'd hate to limit competition and monopolize an industry in Keene, so I'd have to agree with not setting a minimum.
Ms. Visano?
I think that the current gaming facility is less than 10,000. You don't think it is? So when we originally I did some work on that one when it started, and when I originally looked at it, the usage of it, and maybe that is exactly what you're talking about with your sectioning off some of that. So the part that you're actually using for the gaming facility is definitely less than that, because they reduced that when they had that kind of walkthrough now to go to the other section of the business next door to it. So it's sort of dual use in that, in that corridor there, which was a wider, it took out at least 500 to 700 of it, and then they had put the restaurant in the back, so I'm just not exactly sure what part of, like, I don't know if we're talking about restaurants being part of this, or is it accounting, maintenance, all that, so would that be part of the gaming facility as well? Because if that was the case, that we're talking about really just the gaming facility where the games are located, then in my opinion, the 10,000 is great, and it should be all-inclusive, like the little orange blurb says. That would be an easier way, and the free enterprise and the creativity would be allowed. Someone looking to build that could address that as they see fit for their own profit.
I just wanted to weigh in myself. I think I can appreciate the fact that, free enterprise has the word free in it. On the other hand, all zoning and land development code ordinances essentially are the city's exercise of restricting that free enterprise based on what we want to see as a community. So it's by its very nature that that is what it does, and that's what it's intended to do. Having said all that, I'm comfortable with the 10,000 square foot minimum.
Just moving forward to the next item. For standard E, parking and traffic, there was a lot of discussion about this, and I think a lot of it has to do with the size of the facility, but I think where we came down was trying to couch it within our existing regulations. And so after conversations with Mary and the rest of the team, I'll just go through these. Commercial loading zones shall be screened from public rights-of-way and abutting residential properties in accordance with our existing regulations. Instead of trying to create something separate and special for charitable gaming, we'll just go with the regulations we have, which already encourage screening between disparate uses. A traffic study shall be required, which demonstrates that the project will not diminish the capacity or safety of existing city streets, bridges, or intersections. This is pretty common for more intense uses. We actually require it at a certain level, and I think in our reviewing of parking lot needs as well as traffic impacts, casinos do have that impact. They tend to have regular traffic that is pretty high. Proposed uses or development shall comply with the city's noise ordinance and the city code of ordinances and the noise limits in Article 18 of this land development code. So I think in the previous version, I had a lot of language about noise. And again, Mary and the rest of the staff pointed out that we already have a noise ordinance that already defines a noise limit for different times of day. And then also we have in our land development code in Article 18, we have a nuisance standard that allows us to address issues where noise is impacting neighbors. So it's pretty straightforward. And then bus and truck loading and parking is required to be screened from the public right-of-way and any abutting residential properties as in accordance with our existing regulations. So again, we had that separated out with a lot of extra language, and this simplifies it and normalizes it across the city. So just trying to simplify that. I guess any questions or comments? Okay. In terms of standard E, parking and traffic, again, continuing, off-street parking shall be provided at a ratio of not less than 0.75 parking spaces for each gaming position, and gaming position is defined, and we will actually be adding this definition to the land development code. It doesn't appear in the land development code, nor is it a common term of art. Or I guess it is a common term of art, just not defined in the state of New Hampshire. So we're breaking new ground by adding a definition. And then this was another, so the 0.75 spaces per gaming position, we want to know if that's appropriate. And then also where we understood you to have come down on the electric vehicle charging stations was 5% of required parking. So.
Comments? Mayor Khan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to ask about the off-street parking. I know that you reviewed other communities and their land use regulations. Did you draw any information from that relative to this definition of a gaming position?
Yeah, so the gaming position came from one other community, and then we found that it was a term of art across the country in terms of gaming position. In terms of parking spaces and utilization, actually Mary did a bunch of work and looked, and it's incredibly variable. And 0.75 is sort of right in the middle of what across the country people require for casino. Do you want to add it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, may I? Okay.
Yes, please,
So I found an analysis that had been done on parking ratios for different types of casinos, and they give, so they look at tribal casinos versus commercial casinos, and I would say 0.75 is on actually the lower end of what they require, but I thought that would make sense for a minimum, or what they actually see, sorry. So this study looks at what the actual parking is on site for casinos. And I think I have down here, they gave as a rule of thumb that and they give different types of casinos. So again, as Director Round said, there's a sort of a range. But like, for example, a casino is 0.9 to 1.1 per position, but then they add in, or based on if it has other associated uses with it. So as far as having a minimum parking ratio, we thought 0.75 would make sense, and then if they need more, they can always provide more. It's not putting a cap on it. But
Mayor Khan?
Yeah.
Hold on, sorry.
If I could continue there. The other question that we had about the parking is exclusive or shared use, meaning if it is in a plaza, the plaza has its peak hours till 6 p.m. And I mean, how rigid is this exclusive use, for exclusive use of that parking space?
So right now, we require multiple uses have to contribute their total to the, it has to be addressed across the whole site and meet all of that. So that's how we would take this as well, because a casino, in fact, is open all the time and requires parking during its entire opening hours, which would be, I would assume, during the week and on weekends and from reasonably early in the morning till late at night. And so it overlaps with lots of other uses in a plaza. And so that's why you actually need more spaces. And that's why they're additive as opposed to overlapping.
And again, I just want to add one more thing to that. So we do have in Article 9 of the Land Development Code for the on-site parking requirements, getting to the mayor's point about shared parking. If an applicant believes that they have a good case for having shared parking on site to reduce the overall parking, they can request a parking reduction, and that's one of the things that we would look at. So they can get up to a 10% reduction in the overall number of parking spaces required, just administratively, or they can go to the ZBA for a special exception to get up to a 50% reduction. But a parking study in that case is required to demonstrate that the shared parking will actually work with those uses, the mix of uses that they're proposing.
And did you say up to a 50% or 15, 50?
50.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What are restaurants in the commercial district required to have?
It's one space for every 5 seats.
What was that?
One for every 5 seats.
Yeah, one space for every 5 seats.
Mr. Hafer, I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna ask a similar question, movie theater, recreational facility, those sorts of things, just curious.
Yeah, so recreation / entertainment facility indoor, which would probably be a movie theater type thing. It's either 4 spaces for every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, or 1 space for every 4 seats.
Councilor Madison?
Mr. Hofer actually asked the question I was going to ask.
Okay. Councilor Williams?
Do you have a number for how many square feet we would assign to each gaming position?
It would depend, because a gaming position, again, could be 1 seat at an electronic gaming where it's, whatever that is, 6 square feet. And then a table, a seated table, a gaming table, a poker table can, I act as if I know what a poker table looks like. I don't know, they're big. I've seen them on TV.
Yeah, it would be nice to have some numbers there so we could calculate against the 10,000 square feet, how many parking spaces are we actually
Mike.
requiring?
Counselor Williams?
Oh, I need your mic on. Councilor Williams, sorry.
It would be nice to have that number of the square feet per gaming position, because then we could calculate that against the 10,000, so that we would know, how many parking spaces we're requiring here.
If you'll give me a chance, I could probably do some math, but
So, if it's okay, Chair?
Councilor Bosley? Yeah.
I would like to point out a couple things that we're not taking into consideration as we banter back and forth about different uses and their parking requirements. And I am not an expert by any means. I just want to make sure that we're taking into consideration the fact that, and I don't know the answer to this question, but that there could be a different number of ratio of people coming in a car to a casino versus to a restaurant. I mean, I tend to dine out with 5 of my closest friends, versus I imagine people in casinos tend to go with their partner or alone. And so you might and I don't know if that's accurate, that's my own interpretation. So I feel like there has to be some data on that, which would mean that a casino would require more parking than a restaurant might, because of the average overall people that you might have attending in one vehicle. And all of these are, if you have dining with 3 couples, there might be 3 cars. It's very difficult for us to sit here and try to distinguish exactly how many parking spots are going to be required for a facility of this size. We have to come up with, just sort of a reasonable estimate. And I think that if there are requirement or regulation exceptions where they can go and prove that they don't need this parking, then we let that process work itself out.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With this figure and hearing what some of the other businesses require, I just see a lot of pavement being necessary for this type of project, and we're trying to create a more green, efficient, possibly reducing cars in the city. So I just see this as going the opposite of direction of what we're trying to accomplish as a whole. And, you know, if there's no parking, people move on to their next errand, so. I just think this is a high figure compared to what else is out there.
Mayor Khan?
I think we can envision, given the lands that we have defined, the kind of facility that's available without constructing anew. And if that's the case, then we know what the former Penny's building, how many square feet it is, and we can probably know how many parking spaces there are in that quadrant of that mall. Similarly, Sierra Nevada, you know, you see, what I'm getting at is, I don't know that we need to guess at the standards that, I mean, we have a built environment, and I think we would likely be willing to accept the existing built environment as a guide for the zoning regulation. At least I would. So I wonder if collecting an example from each of 3 locations might be a way to go, both in terms of the square footage discussion that we just concluded. Well, maybe we didn't conclude, but we began, and the parking ratio discussion.
So, I think that's fine. We can probably, again, I can probably run some numbers for you, given a short period of time. However, I also want to point out, I think Mary mentioned indoor gaming facility requiring 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. I just want to make that clear. In a 10,000 square foot facility, that's not a whole lot of spaces. So, and I don't know, at a regular, the only casinos I've been around were in Las Vegas, where I don't feel like a lot of people drive to them. So it's hard for me to understand, but I have driven past other casinos where there are a lot of parking spaces. It's a big sea of asphalt, and they're often very full. I don't know how many people would come by bus to a charitable gaming facility in Keene, and it's hard to say. What I will say is the .75 parking spaces came from the other community that has pretty fleshed out regulations. Rochester did a lot of this work, came up with this number, and so I'm confident in the thought that went into this from another community, just because I know that community and I know the people who work there and the work that they do, and they do good work. So I could ask them for more detail on where they came up with the number. We could run some numbers for you, but I also think this number has a lot of backing. It's gone through a process. It came out of that process. And second, there are the safety valves of the parking study and the special exception, which, if you're talking about the investment that we're talking about for a charitable gaming facility, going through a special exception process is not that much additional work or time. So I guess what I'm asking for is faith that, this is a pretty good number, and we're not going to crush the opportunity for someone to have a charitable gaming facility based on this parking space requirement.
Mayor Khan?
I'd like to see us move ahead too. And I suspect you have put a lot of work into this, and, but the range of what we just talked about, one space per 1,000 square feet is 100 spaces in 10,000 square foot facility. Versus where I think charitable gaming has gone, which is to the casino model of, because it's more profitable, right? And we've learned that table gaming is not profitable, that it's historic horse racing that is most profitable. If there were 300 of those slot machines, sorry to make the analogy, but I think it's pretty, holds up, that would be 225 parking spaces. So the range on this is wide, is why I jumped to, gee, I wonder what the built environment really holds, because maybe there's guidance in that. I would like to see us proceed, if you can help us get to that place.
Counselor Bosley?
I just want to, as a final thought, point out that I don't think the patronage of JCPenney and the patronage of a 10,000 square foot casino or 20,000 square foot casino will look the same. And so, you know, I don't want to see, also, my concern is to protect the other establishments inside some of these potential homes. And I'll use the JCPenney analogy. If we limit this parking requirement so significantly that we're requiring 30 spots, and then 300 cars show up and no one can shop at any of the other stores there, I think we've done a disservice to the other business owners in our community. And so we just need to be very thoughtful about this decision, because in a lot of these spaces that we've looked at, these are potentially shared spaces.
Thank you. Is it all right for me?
Yeah,
Sure.
please,
Okay.
Director Rounds.
So again, EV charging, I don't know if we want to jump into another discussion about that, following that. But I think originally it was 2%. There was discussion that increased it to 5%. You know, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to step on a hornet's nest again, but I had a different conclusion from the meeting. I thought we stayed at 2%, but that was just my recollection and reading the minutes.
Yeah.
Mr. Clancy?
Yes, I was the one that wanted to bump it up, but I don't recall the conversation being that way. But I would like to see, depending on where we land on parking spaces, I would like to see a minimum requirement, because there could be a facility that only needs 50 spots. So I think a minimum of 2 or 4 EV spots would be great if they fall in that lesser parking requirement.
All right, I'll keep pushing along here. And now we're at discussion, so discuss away. I'll run, I can run anywhere in the slides, so if there, we can talk more about parking, we can talk more about the EV thing, we can talk more about square footage. I can run back through and say what I heard, and maybe that'll spark more discussion, if that makes sense, or looks like there are already some people chomping at the bit.
I think it would be useful if you could give a quick recap of changes that you've made based on tonight's, or that you would make based on tonight's discussion. And
Sure
see
thing.
where the boards are on that.
I didn't hear anything about the 500 or 1,000 feet.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you said one lot, and then this slide came up, or one per lot, and this slide came up, I was on the fence about the 500 requirement between facilities. I think if we're gonna say one per lot, then we can omit the 500 feet requirement.
Councilor Haas?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I see the 1,000-foot requirement as further going to the path of minimizing the impact on the community. but we'll get it somehow.
All right.
Sorry,
Councilor Haas.
not on that point, but back on the mapping, I'm not sure of the name of the street, forgive me. South of Route 9, opposite. Is that's not Key, that's Key Road where the auto dealerships are?
No, that's,
That's 10.
Winchester, yeah. So that's Winchester south of 101, is that what you mean?
No, south
South of
is,
the roundabout.
south of the, was it the Marketplace?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah, Ashbrook Road down, there's a Fenton dealership down there, there's Subaru down there in the back. Is that included in the areas we're covering?
Yeah, no, that's Production Ave, and that's
Swansea, I
industrial.
believe.
Yeah, it's zoned industrial.
Oh, okay, he's talking
Yeah.
across from Home Depot. Okay.
Yeah, opposite Home Depot,
The Subaru
okay.
dealership.
Alright.
down south there.
Yeah,
That is zoned
That's
industrial.
still
on
within
Route 9,
Keene.
yeah, yeah, basically.
Are we including that? I'm sorry.
It is not included, and that's zoned industrial. That's why we didn't include it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Khan?
If we're talking about territories, I wanted to raise a question about Route 12, but Lower Main Street, essentially. That portion that is Keene. And I guess I'd encourage us to think in terms of the distance between the 10, 12, 9 Main Street intersection and moving south towards the residential area, but not including the residential area. But there's a number of commercial tracks there, some of which run pretty deep. And I guess I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody's got that interest. But I know I've shared that with you once before. It seems like those properties are a little bit more stale than, and maybe could be redeveloped in a manner that might be suitable for what we've defined.
Councilor Belsley?
Could we, I don't know if we discussed that area last time. Is that commercial?
It
Could-
came
could
up
we see it
briefly,
on the
and
map?
I believe some of it is commercial, and if you'll give me a moment, I will very slowly load. Yeah, you're not seeing it yet. Okay, let me see if I can change my sharing. If you'll give me a moment, I'll share. And I again apologize in advance for the zooming effect here.
Okay.
But let's see. Oh, why can't I move there?
So, Mr. Mayor, are you talking about like the Sheridan Ave, Manchester Street?
Yes.
Okay. I pulled up the zoning map, and that's all commerce as well. And, I mean, from a brief look at that commerce zone, that looks like it would fit our other, similar to our other requirements.
This area of the city, is that where we're? Am I in the wrong place? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Fire warehouse and all that.
So a couple limitations there. I'll just, I want to turn on the flood map just to make sure. Again, you can develop in floodplain, but it does impact what can be easily developed there. And I'll turn on the zoning just to reiterate what Councilor Bosley said. So yeah, it's all
what we're looking at, the orange space is commercially
Yeah,
zoned.
this area here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, that's all commercial.
Counselor Williams?
I guess I'd just be nervous about that area because of the traffic. Thinking about coming out of Martel Court, what a pain that is. So that's my reservation about that area. Otherwise, it looks suitable.
Counselor Bosley?
I agree with that particular intersection, that's tough, but I think that the rest of that really is suitable, and from the beginning, I've liked the idea of having these facilities off from that main corridor, so if people are traveling in, they're traveling in, hopping right off, going where they're gonna go, and visiting the casino, and then, on their way. So I feel like it's a pretty decent representation of what we've been looking for, and I think we should add it with the similar restrictions that you used for the other commercial lots.
Mayor Khan?
Could that area have the carve-out that Counselor Williams suggested?
Oh, absolutely, we can say, I would define a north road and a south road, and then just say, no facilities on Martel Court or off of Martel Court.
It did show the floodplain
Yeah, so
restriction
that
there
area is
anyway.
actually even more, it's actually in the floodway, most of those parcels, so that would be very hard to develop.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, if we're requiring a traffic study, if an applicant came to us, wouldn't we be able to say, well, if you want to build on Martel Court, you gotta reorient that, improve that traffic flow?
Yes.
Okay.
If I,
Mayor Khan?
because I know that territory well from past lives, and it could wrap around to Sheridan Street and come out that way. So it's not totally landlocked the way that it's arranged currently.
And there's always traffic lights.
So, just to get some clarity, in the unlikely event that we're able to close this discussion out tonight, would you define it as commercial properties south of 101 and north of Silent Way? If that's actually,
That's the
basically that
cemetery,
larger block of
Silent Way.
commercial properties right there would all be included as potential, or would you say they have to front on Main Street or Martel Court?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Counselor Bosley?
It's hard, I'm looking at the City of Keene zoning map, and that not every street is labeled, so it's really difficult for me to identify, but there are some very large lots in the back of that commercial area that are not fronting on Main Street, so those should be on the table if somebody wanted to build a facility, I would think.
I think, yeah, I think they're,
Are they in the
I think they're in the floodway. Oh, no, they're mostly in the floodplain.
floodplain? Okay.
So that's that cross-hatched area is floodplain, which is eminently developable.
Okay.
Are you showing the
Counselor Haas?
floodway?
So the floodway is the light blue, and the floodplain is the crosshatch.
So conceivably, you can build in the floodplain, but certainly not in the floodway. Those areas around.
Chairman?
Mayor Khan?
I think, given what this discussion, I think that the area to the west side of Lower Main Street is really what we're talking about as being a suitable commercial area that would have enough features to fit our guidelines.
So we can craft some language there, but I do looking at the faces around the room when I suggested we try and finish tonight, I'm not sure that's gonna happen, so we can absolutely work up a definition and bring it back to you, next time.
So,
Any other- I'll try and bring up the
if you wouldn't
presentation.
mind, Director Rounds, just kind of jumping back in with whatever
Yeah.
changes you think you've heard.
Let me start sharing again.
Mr. Chair, two
Mr.
items that I
Hayford.
think we might owe staff a bit more of our feelings on is the parking percentage. It feels like we've heard from a couple perspectives on that, but haven't given them much to really go on. And then the other one was this 500-foot distance change. I had the opposite reaction as Mr. Clancy of seeing it on this map. I wanted it to be 1,000. All of a sudden, 500 felt very short to me, seeing them across the street. I know it's not to scale, but 500 feet is about the distance from here to the corner news, if I believe, and if I measured correctly, and it feels pretty close to me to have more than one facility. So I would certainly be in favor of keeping that distance and would also support increasing it to 1,000 from my perspective. And in terms, sorry, while I have the floor, in terms of parking, I think the 0.75 with the ability for other remedies to reduce that requirement is appropriate and would support continuing with a 0.75 for this.
Okay,
Director
so,
Rounds.
yeah, so the other, there was the 500, then, sorry for flashing around here. The 10,000 square feet, I think there were a lot of different opinions, but I guess at some point it's just gonna come down to the motion and where you all end up voting. I'm not sure we can hammer that out tonight. And then in terms of the parking, yeah, there's the 0.75 spaces, the EV percentage, although if we misheard, that's totally possible. We were going on memory at first, and then we had the minutes, and we were trying to dig through the draft minutes. So absolutely, it would be helpful to go either way on that one, and then that's it. And then obviously the additional land off of South Main Street.
And Mr. Chair, can I, oh, sorry. Okay,
Ms.
I
Brenner?
just wanted to say when we were going through for the floor area, we were working off of the, what we heard was that you came to like the compromise on the 10,000 square feet last time. And so the question there that we were asking was, should that 10,000 square feet be all-inclusive or not? That was
Right.
still something that was left up in the air. It sounds like the 10,000 square feet might be an open question again, so that might be, we should probably add that to the list of questions.
Councilor Bosley?
So, as the chair of the last meeting, I have to say, we cannot at every meeting revisit every one of these questions every time. Like, we have to understand that we've made a decision and move forward to things that we still need to hammer out. I mean, it's very difficult to wrangle a room this size and to rehash every one of these points. It's free, open season every time we sit here. If we want to discuss whether that 10,000 feet is all-inclusive or not, I think that's fair game. But we spend a lot of time making the decision of reducing that 20,000 square foot requirement to 10, and I'd like to stay with that. When it comes to the parking requirement, I've already spoken that I'm comfortable with the 0.75. I would like to support Mr. Clancy's position to have a minimum of the EV spots. I think 2% is fair, but I think a minimum of 2 spots is reasonable to add that language. And I do think we're gonna need a draft back because we've added another territory to the mix here. And we really need to, I think, come to some sort of consensus on the distances between facilities, and I think we're pretty close.
Ms. Vazano?
I agree with that, thank you. I think that the 10,000 has been decided on, I agree with it. I can live with it being all-inclusive, but if everyone wanted to go forward with it sectioning out, I can also live with that. It's not something I'm willing to have a ton more discussion on for that purpose. The 500 feet I feel very comfortable with because there's all these other positions in place and that will have restrictions in place and ordinances in place that will help reduce the number of places. I also don't think that they're going to come in these large waves. So I don't think that will be happening. I think that the .75 parking space is perfectly adequate. They don't fill up like that. It's rare that you see the parking spaces that are currently available, even all full, at any time of the day. And only because I am involved with some, in my other world of business, I'm there, that, not inside, just, but I am there often. So I am aware of the parking issue that was originally an issue then, and it has not been an issue at all. So I feel very comfortable with all of it, but I do think we need to add in that additional section. So other than that, I would be comfortable moving forward.
Counselor Williams.
With respect to the 10,000 square feet, no, I don't want to revisit 10,000 square feet, but I do think making it all-inclusive is what I'd like to see. Just because once it is running, you know, if the business needs to move things around as things change, you know, create a storage area out of what used to be a gaming floor, that they're not prevented from that kind of thing. So I think, you know, give them a total facility size, and, you know, that can be that. I don't have a strong opinion on the distance issue. On the one hand, yeah, keep them separated. On the other hand, maybe it would be good to put them all in one place and then they're not scattered all over. So weighing those two, I don't have a strong preference. And I had a third one, but it's not coming to me now. Parking. Yeah, generally, my preference is to minimize the space that is dedicated to asphalt. And I don't want to risk having more parking than is appropriate, which I think we already have at a lot of our existing commercial facilities. So that's why I would tend to a lower number there. And then, you know, if the people running these casino businesses want to have more parking, that is their prerogative.
I'll fill the empty space there. Thank you,
Counselor
Chair.
Haas, yeah, sorry.
the,
Shame on me for taking a breath.
Sounds like we're, just the general sense of the room, we're in agreement on most everything, except the one point that is my favorite, the distance. Would the chair entertain a straw poll just to get a sense of how people feel? Is that inappropriate or appropriate?
I think it's fine.
Non-binding.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
What are the choices?
What would you say? How would you pose the question?
I'd pose the question, 500 feet between casino establishments, charitable gaming establishments. All in favor?
No, you're just
Sorry,
talking about one portion here, just casino to casino? Or-
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So as opposed to
500?
versus
500 versus 1,000?
Yeah.
All right, all those, how about just a show of hands for 500? Show of hands for 1,000?
Dead time.
That's fine.
And not a strong
Is it a
opinion.
tie? I'll switch.
Okay, all right.
I didn't vote.
Oh, Phil.
You
Phil,
can
you
break
were
the
better
tie,
than
Come
Phil.
on.
Kind of counselor.
Well, I think it should be less than 500, I think.
No.
So I'll go with 500.
Okay,
All right, so I think we landed on 500.
all right. Sounds like 500.
We heard 500 wins there by a hair.
Oh.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to back making the 10,000 all-inclusive for all those things. I'm in favor of that. And I know we don't know what the state is going to do in terms of licensing, but, and I don't know, I might be throwing a wrench here, but I don't know what our ability is. I know was something the state was looking at in terms of requiring a rental for the charities that these facilities, the table rental that that these facilities charge nonprofits. And I don't know if we're able to say that they can't charge.
If the state places a requirement, we have no right to change that.
The state doesn't have a requirement or no requirement, so I didn't know if we were able to jump whatever the state decides and say charitable gaming facilities can't charge a table fee.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I believe that's in the RSA
Well,
for charitable gaming.
If I might, it's
Yeah.
not it's not in the RSA now. It is what's being debated in Concord currently. We don't know the outcome of that, right, just yet, but we should by Thursday. So I think until the state would, I don't think, if it's not a licensing requirement, we can't go there.
So, I'm hearing different things, but we're gonna have to come back so we can continue talking about I can bring this up again, or we can have another straw poll, or, what I heard is the majority of people for the 10,000 square feet are saying inclusive. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's safe to say.
okay, that's what we'll go forward with, to come back to next time. And then parking, I'm hearing generally comfortable with 0.75 and 2% required with a minimum of at least 2, regardless of the number of spaces. Is that, okay,
Yeah, I believe that's accurate.
all right. And then we will come back with a map defining the South Main area, looking mostly at the west side, or exclusively the west side. And I'm not sure what else there. Yeah, we'll just bring a map for that and then remind you that it's all down to the way that definition is worded for those areas, not what the map shows. So I just don't want people to get hung up on the map in particular. All right, I really appreciate the time. I know this is probably getting stale for everyone, but it's really actually heartening to have you all nerding out on zoning like we do. So thank you.
And I don't want to make too many assumptions, but I think items 2, 3, and 4 on the proposed ordinance are not in question at this point, right? Okay. I think they've already been agreed to.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay. At this time, well, this is not a formal public hearing. I would like to invite any members of the public to offer comments or ask questions on the proposed ordinance. No comments? Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to close the public portion of the workshop. And I think board deliberation is not required. We're going to come back, planning department is going to come back with revisions for us next meeting. Okay? All right. So, moving to the next item, which would be a neighborhood parking project.
So, Mr. Chair, this is Mary Brenner, Senior Planner. We have a consultant with us here tonight on the teams. His name is Greg Strangeways. He's actually, he works for a parking firm, so Walker Consultants, and he has a presentation for you about a project, and I just wanted to introduce it briefly. So most of you may recall about a year ago, City Council accepted a housing report that documented housing needs in Keene. And the next step with that report was to do some implementation grants through the Invest NH HOP grant program. And so we're actually working on 2 implementation grants. One of them already wrapped up, and that was the cottage courts. The other one was this neighborhood parking program, which is trying to address parking needs, as you were just talking about, and looking at the possibility of using on-street parking to help use land more efficiently and not have to require so many on-site parking spaces for each dwelling unit. And so we hired Walker Consultants to help us with this project, and they are here tonight, not to go into everything, because this is going to be presented to the MSFI committee, but they're going to go over the project in general and then the zoning specific recommendations, which we thought would be helpful for you all to hear, since you deal with changes to the zoning code. With that, I'll hand it over to Greg.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mary, could you just introduce the individual again for us?
Yes, sorry, his name is Greg Strangeways.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And so thank you, Mary, for the introduction. Thank you all, Planning Board, PLD Committee, for taking a few minutes with this. Should I share my screen?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, good. We're doing well. Yeah, as Mary said, I'm going to focus on the zoning part of this. This did come out of the housing needs assessment that was completed last year, so it is grant funded. And the idea is to facilitate more housing development. So as you know, off-street parking can be a barrier to getting housing built. A lot of projects just don't pencil out at all, or the housing that gets built then is more expensive than it otherwise might need to be. And specifically with a focus about whether more on-street parking could supply some of the needed parking and reduce the need then for building off-street parking. Our study area was not downtown. It was these neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. So you can see the map there, some near Keene State College, some north and east of downtown. So the idea there was these are areas where your zoning already allows more density than exists today. And you're getting some interest in residential development. So that, again, the idea was to facilitate some of this housing growth. It's probably not going to be sudden or really large developments, but it is a goal of the city, it sounds like, to encourage this. And there are some ordinances. The snow ban system that you have is one ordinance we're looking at in a residential parking permit program, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. You guys are planning folks, so we're going to focus more on besides the focus of the study, we also try to come up with supportive policies that are related. So that's where the zoning came in. We're kind of projecting future growth. Again, it's going to be gradual in Keene, we think. Even we did a range of growth scenarios, but we did in our study area there use your data. We had, the GIS and your assessor's database and just mapped the land use. And then overall, again, these are the categories of recommendations. So some of this is, parking and even the winter snow plowing operations, that kind of thing. Zoning is what we're really going to focus on. Some parking technology, communications, policies around parking specifically, and then a little bit about TDM, transportation demand management, which I'll mention briefly in a minute. So we recognize that you've already taken some steps to really relax parking minimums. That's where, there is a lot of momentum around New England and around the country about this, again, to encourage more housing to be built. Obviously, we're, just not getting enough housing overall, and it's getting more expensive. So we think you're on the right track with all of that. You've reduced eliminated the minimums in the downtown core area and made provisions for these variances and special exceptions. So we just wanted to give you a couple more things. We know you're probably going to take some time to assess how those are working, how that is impacting developments that are being proposed. But again, from our work around the country, we just wanted to give you a couple things to consider here. So one is that parking demand is less at senior housing and affordable housing, so that creating a separate reduced minimum in places where you still feel you need a parking minimum may make sense there. So again, in the downtown core, you don't have the minimum at all, but for the downtown growth and downtown limited districts, we're proposing for senior housing 0.7 spaces per unit, and outside of that 0.85. So less than you have currently in your code. And then affordable housing, you'll see in a minute where generally a lot of municipal zoning goes by unit for parking requirements. But most practitioners feel like number of bedrooms is the better metric. This just makes sense, right? Larger units are going to have more people and therefore on average more vehicles. So here for affordable housing, we do it by number of bedrooms. And again, a little less in the downtown growth, downtown limited, but even in the other districts, less than you currently have in your code. And then, kind of related to what I'm talking about here, that all of your parking requirements could change to number of bedrooms, the size of the unit. So we're taking your existing requirements there. So downtown core, we wouldn't change that. We'd like the no minimum there. But to make it, especially for studios and one bedrooms, to have reduced requirements compared to other units there. So that's, again, from data across the country, we think this makes sense. And then I won't go into all the transportation demand management. This is another section of our recommendations, but we do see you have a process now to require some bicycle infrastructure to at least be able to negotiate with development. So we just would encourage that wherever it makes sense for a development to provide perhaps a transit stop on their property, or bicycle parking, or to provide land so that you have a right of way for a bicycle lane. All of those things can reduce parking demand, and again, then help with getting housing built. So we always recommend you look at the parking supply side, but also the demand side. And then just where we're at, so we are actually wrapping up this month. That still gives you time to either give us feedback now, or if you think of it soon. For all of our recommendations, we do have, Mary there is our project manager for the city. We do have a technical advisory committee with Public Works and police and others. We do have, we did already get feedback online through a survey, and we will for these draft recommendations. We will be at the community night next week. As Mary already mentioned, this will go again. We presented once early on, and we'll present June 26th for the MSFI committee. And then, on the two things I talked about, the winter snow emergency system and then the residential parking permit, we're also proposing draft ordinance language as part of it. So we are wrapping up soon, but again, we'd love to get your feedback on any of this. And that's it.
Questions or comments for Greg? Chairman Bosley.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to add. I just want to say that as the council has been, for 5 years that I've been aware, been talking about this winter parking ban, and I hope you bring us some positive changes to that program that we've had in place for a really long time. I think that will be the start of changing some of these neighborhood requirements.
Yeah, I would say we're not the only ones, I think, talking about that. We could tell. And it certainly fit with our mission here, right, to encourage housing that most people don't need on-street parking currently, but for the few who do, the complete winter on-street parking ban overnight is a major inconvenience. So we did look at peer municipalities, and it sounds like there's a lot of momentum to actually get it changed anyway, even if we weren't recommending it. So we're trying to help with that.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Visano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that presentation. I would also be excited to hear more about the winter parking ban and any potential changes to that. That would help us. I do have a question about the number of bedrooms and how that works in a city like ours where there are units rented out per bedroom for the college purposes, and many of them don't come with vehicles. And so is it, when you're looking at the comparison across the country or other places that you've worked, have you seen that always work, that the number of bedrooms is a better way to figure out how much parking a unit should have?
So that's how the data is collected. It is just all that we can know about the land use, and then what is the actual parking occupancy. And for residences, that's usually done overnight when the peak demand is. And so, yeah, generally speaking, the demand correlates with the number of bedrooms. And usually, again, you're trying to design for not the absolute, busiest possible condition, but something that is, we usually shoot like traffic engineers for the 85th percentile. So, generally speaking, that works. Obviously, it may not be perfect depending on exactly what's happening with each property.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Councilor
Mr.
Haas.
Chair. You're looking at how parking is needed in neighborhoods, where it should be relieved, where it should be enhanced. Will you also be talking about how it can be arranged and give guidance on, say, curb sizes and what the street should look like in that area, the presence of sidewalks, how that can all fit together? And in the back of my mind, the question of traffic calming is jumping up. That's all related to parking as well. Appreciate your thoughts. I
Yeah.
hope that's in your study.
Yes, yeah, no, great questions, and it is absolutely. So, generally, it's probably easiest for Keene to make improvements to a road if it's already a road that's going to be reconstructed, or maybe if there's a private development that can help pay for it. So what we're trying to do is provide a guide to all of that for when the opportunity comes up to redo a road. But we do think on-street parking can be part of traffic calming. That, generally evidence shows that if you're narrowing kind of the right-of-way for moving traffic, it slows down traffic. Yes, as part of all this, right now we see where there is cars parking on street. Some of them are half on that landscape strip and half in the road, so they're not blocking traffic, but they are, partially blocking the sidewalk. So that all of that really should be improved. That, when you're redoing the road, then, better sidewalk, better landscape strip. We, have a guide then, depending on the street width, about, whether a street would have to become one way to fit the on-street parking, all those kinds of things.
Quick follow on that. So there will be comments along those lines in your final report?
Yes, exactly. That's sort of the heart of it, really, is how to make more formal on-street parking. In a lot of places, it's kind of informal now, and could work better if you formalize it. But that comes with other improvements to the streetscape.
Thank you.
Mayor Khan?
I did not see you talk about one-way streets, but it occurred to me, given some of the requirements that you may be introducing in order to accommodate more on-street parking, that given the widths on some of those streets, which I assume you can do by GIS, in any case, that you can give some consideration to, is that something that needs to be introduced?
Yes. So, and I do actually have some slides. I try to focus on the zoning part for you guys, but if we want to get into it, but yeah, we're giving guidelines about, depending on how wide the street is, whether it can fit, two-way traffic plus parking or only one-way traffic plus parking. Because those are, so in the end, every potential street that could have on-street parking, we don't think that will happen, because it would require some traffic network changes. So overall, I think we're making a conservative assumption that about 1/3 of the potential on-street parking, actually winds up occurring within, the 10-year planning horizon.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess I just suggest the amount of community impact is significant depending on that potential consideration.
Yeah, true.
All right, I think we've exhausted our questions. Thank you very much, Greg.
All right, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is residential lot size discussion. And Mary, is that you or Jesse? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Brenner, Senior Planner. And I do have a couple slides, but I don't even think I really need to show them. This is a pretty simple, I think, idea. So we as staff have an idea, and we wanted to basically run it through this committee to see if you feel like we should put more time and effort into it or not. So that's really what we're hoping to get from you today. This is really a general discussion. We're not necessarily promising anything, but we have identified in the zoning code, specifically for the high density and the medium density zoning districts, which are both residential zoning districts, we have a minimum lot size requirement, and then we have a minimum lot area for a single dwelling unit requirement, as well as a minimum lot area for each additional dwelling unit. And we wanted to dig into that second part and do some analysis and do some research to see how much of a barrier that is to housing and whether or not we should consider reducing that requirement. So just to give you a couple of examples, in the medium density district, the minimum lot area is 8,000 square feet. So if you wanted to have a single family home, you need an 8,000 square foot lot. If you wanted to have a two-family home or a duplex, you would need to have an additional 5,400 square feet. So that would be a 13,400 square foot lot. And if you wanted to have a triplex, so 3 units, it would have to be 18,800 square feet. And you can only have up to 3 units in medium density. The reason why we're bringing this up as a potential issue is because sometimes folks in the community will have a larger building that already exists, and they might want to split a large single-family home into 2 units or 3 units. And so they're not actually increasing the size of the building, but because they don't have the additional lot area, they can't do it without going to get a variance. And so we identified this as a potential barrier to that type of unit conversion. In the high-density district right now, the regulations state that the minimum lot area is 6,000 square feet, and then the minimum lot area for each additional dwelling unit is 5,000 square feet. So a single family is 6,000 square feet lot area that you would need. A 2-family, you need 11,000 square feet. 3-family, you need 16,000. 4-family, you need 21,000, and so on. There's no cap on the number of units in high density, but you can imagine if you wanted a large apartment building built, or like 20 units, you'd have to have a pretty large lot. And so it's not a very efficient use of land. And so if we want to, what we heard from the community in the past with other proposed zoning changes is that we want to encourage the additional housing development to happen as much as possible in our already developed and built up areas. And this could be a barrier to that. And so we wanted to bring this to you and have that discussion, see what, if you are all interested in this topic and you think it's a worthwhile use of our time, or if you'd rather that we focused on other topics. And we do have, on the agenda, we added the more time items similar to how some of the council committees do that. So other potential items that we are planning to work on in the future are listed there. And so that's really it. And we wanted to get your thoughts.
Ms. Fasano?
I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you for recognizing me. So I think that's a wonderful idea that you could have the 8,000 square feet and be able to turn that current single family into a duplex if you wanted to. I could see that being a real solution for many people, especially where families are moving back in together. Could even be that situation. So I don't see, I think it's interesting to look at, and yes, I would love to hear more about it.
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, I had the privilege of speaking for my neighbor who was going to zoning board for a variance on for the 10-foot, reducing the buffer from 10 feet to 3 feet and to add an additional unit next to his house. And I think the planning department was saying that he might fall under cottagecore or an ADU, but he wasn't granted the variance because of safety concerns and so there were some other concerns that the zoning board had, but I saw much of my neighborhood, the lot sizes are not, couldn't even support a single family house. But there are dwellings there that are, grandfathered in because of the history of the neighborhood, but we're very limited in at least the east side to build an ADU, to do a cottagecore layout or add an additional unit. And I know that's not what you're necessarily looking at in splitting houses, but I do see some difficulties for folks that want to build an ADU. And I feel like that buffer zone needs to also be looked at as well, and reducing the lot sizes as well.
So are you talking about the setbacks?
The setback, thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
all right.
Not the buffer, the setback, thank you.
Counselor Haas?
Thank you, Chair. We're always concerned with the character of the neighborhood, and we try to define it by lot sizes and such, and setbacks and such, and all of that's important. I'm thinking that if we limit the number of units per lot, which we do, we're more concerned with what the building mass is. So to subdivide a building from one family into a duplex without changing the size of the building, I think most people would agree with that that's fine. Perhaps instead of making additional land area a function of the number of units, we might come up with some different idea of using a function of the increase in building size, that you could limit how much larger the building could be based on how big it was originally. So that way we control the change of the character of the neighborhood by containing the masses of the building as they grow. So you might be able to change a single-family residence into a duplex by adding on 10 feet off the back, and it might work perfectly. But right now, that would require an additional, in the high-density district, 5,000 square feet of land area. But I don't think anybody would object to another 10 feet as long as all the setbacks and other requirements were met, including parking that would go with it as well. So just a different kind of thought, a different way to approach it, perhaps.
Counselor Bosley?
For me, I am a visual person, and it's hard for me to understand the concept of what some of this math is. So I just looked up a property that I own on Spruce Street in the medium density area, and it's a 3-family building, and it sits on 0.33 acres, which in my calculations is approximately 14,000 square feet. And according to the numbers you just gave me, that building would not be allowed to exist currently. And if anyone were to drive by it right now, it's actually a great candidate for a cottage court because there are huge green space, open area green space, and tons of parking. And it's not constrained at all in the way that it's designed. So I'm definitely open to looking at these and what they would be realistically, like what a realistic number is for the density that we're needing to move forward. And I would appreciate some visuals, because that's how my brain works as we start talking about this. I also, there's not a ton of them, but I also think there are some vacant lots that might not be being developed currently because someone could only put a single-family home on it, where they might be able to put a duplex if we amend some of these requirements.
Counselor Jones.
Thank you. Mary, over the years, we've been talking about moving away from Euclidean base and getting to form base, and doesn't your concept kind of support that movement? It sounds like it.
Sure, so I would love to do form-based code. We have the form-based code in the downtown, and I think we want to give ourselves some time to really work with that code. We haven't had a lot of development happen in the city since that code was instituted, and so, but yes, to answer your question, this gets us a little bit closer to more of a form-based, where we're trying to match the existing built environment versus create a new development pattern that's more sort of spread out. This gets us closer to it, but I wouldn't call it form-based code.
No, I wasn't calling that, but it's a step in that direction.
Definitely, yes.
Mr. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why is not HD1 not included in this discussion? And I'm looking at HD1, and it doesn't seem really high density with the minimum lot requirement.
So I'll just look it up really quick. High density one. Oh, it's already so this zoning district, first of all, I believe there's only very few lots. And I believe that it was created for a very specific development type that was envisioned at the time. We can certainly add it to the list to take a look at. But I was more looking at the majority of the districts are the high density and medium density. Just the high density one doesn't have as much out there.
Well, Mary, if I heard you correctly, this is one idea that you guys could spend time on, as well as the 3 items in item B, short-term rental, neighborhood activity core areas, private roads. Would it be useful or for you if we gave you a prioritization of those 4 things?
Definitely, I think that would be very useful. And I will say the reason why we brought the residential lot size discussion up as a potential next step was because we have a lot of other projects that we as staff are working on right now. And this one would require a good amount of data analysis, and the actual change that we would have to make would be, I hope, knock on wood, relatively simple. It would really just be striking out a couple of sentences in the existing code, and that would be it for the ordinance. So we thought this is something that if you felt we should move forward with, we could actually get through potentially this year. Those other items, I think, will require a little bit more time and research. And so if you think they're a higher priority and we should start working on them first, we can, but we probably won't get to them, or we could start working on them, but we wouldn't get to a point where we could bring you an ordinance until, I'm looking at Director Rounds, but probably not for a while.
Yeah, I think we were looking at effort versus time. I think Mary said it exactly right. This is one where we really think this is a small change that could have a really big impact. So we thought it was an easy first one to go, and it really gets at adding additional housing right away. It's sort of like the cottage court. It's another way to make a small change, although I think cottage court's a big change, but in this case, it's a small change that makes a big impact.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. So what I'm hearing from staff is that residential lot size, because of the trade-off between effort and benefit, should be the number one priority on this list.
That's our preference, but again,
Okay.
we're here to listen to you, and I do want to address one thing, if you don't mind, Chair.
Yeah, please.
The HD1, the reason we don't have this, it's not part of this, is that HD1 doesn't have an additional lot area required for an additional unit. It's just, this is how much your lot area has, or your lot has to be. So,
Councilor Bosley.
Thank you. So from my perspective, this is definitely the quickest, fastest way to get momentum going with adding tools. So it's great. Next, I want to see work on all of them, but I really think private roads, I feel like that might have the biggest impact. And we've been balancing out a lot of stuff that we're doing in the downtown core and the higher density districts with things that would impact the lower density districts and the rural districts. And I think those private roads would really impact those districts more, and might be a next thing for winter, spring 2025, if we want to, depending on what the workload looks like. Just because those developments that might need to use that new language in the zoning would most likely be in more rural areas. So I think it's a good balance.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Ms. Brenner. All right, next agenda item is new business. Any new business that board members would like to see added to a future meeting agenda? Councilor Jones?
Can I just add to the wartime items, we were gonna put the nodes in there also. I see it's not on there.
Mr. Chair, the nodes are the last item on the agenda, I believe. In that list, it says neighborhood activity core areas, so second.
I didn't know I was the nodes, okay.
Nope, sorry.
Okay, so that's a no, that means nodes, okay. Commercial nodes. Thank you for that question. That's, I don't think any of us, we probably all had our own definition of that item. Thank you. I'll ask again, any new business? Okay. So let me say that the next joint planning board and PLD meeting is Monday, July 8th, 2024 in these chambers. And I will now adjourn this meeting at 8:21 PM. Thank you, everyone.